Hi. Well, thank you all for coming. It's great to be here. So today, I'm here to talk about opportunities for linking the university to research opportunities with the CGIAR research program on roots, tubers, and bananas. So I'm going to start with a little bit of just overview about what is the CGIAR and what is the Roots, Tubers, and Bananas research program, and then get into how we are envisioning this partnership and how things are moving along and what types of opportunities we have available. Just to orient me a little bit, how many people here are familiar with the CGIAR? Wow, okay. So I'll skip right through that stuff. I won't spend a lot of time on it then. Okay, so you know, then sounds like most people know what the CGIAR is. It stands for Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research. It's an kind of global network of international research organizations focused on food security and improving natural resource management. You can see these are the locations where you'll find the CGIAR centers. And these centers are international in scope, so many of them have satellite offices as well, in addition to these that you see marked on the map. This I took right off the CGIAR website. You can see the list of the different centers, the names of the centers, and maybe a little bit hard to read, but you can get it, if you go, you can get a sense for the different foci of the centers. So there's center on rice, a center on potatoes, center on forestry, etc. These are our system level outcomes, or within the system known as the SLOs. These are the main kind of overarching lofty goals, what we're trying to achieve: reducing poverty, improving nutrition and health, increasing food security, and improving natural resource management. And then some years ago, there was a reorganization within the CGIAR into research programs, which is now all being reorganized yet again. So I think in a year or two, this will look very different. But for the moment, it's a good way to just give an explanation of what are the research programs within the CGIAR. You'll see 16 boxes here, each with a name on it. Each one is a research program, and those research programs are comprised of various CGIAR research centers that participate in that research program. And there's all different numbers of centers involved in the various research programs. So I work with Roots, Tubers, and Bananas, and we have 4 CGIAR research centers involved in RTB. Some of the others have different numbers. So CCAFS, which is climate change, has, I think, all of the centers involved. So it's different for each research program. You'll see at the top of this slide, we have some overarching themes. Gender is one of those. It's often also referred to as a cross-cutting theme. Partnership building and capacity strengthening are also overarching themes. So now I'm going to start narrowing to talk about the RTB research program. So why Roots, Tubers, and Bananas? There's the importance of the Roots, Tubers, and Bananas. Are they a major staple in the world, a major staple food among the top 10? It's a cheap source of energy and nutrients. Oftentimes they're locally produced and therefore not as subject to fluctuations in global markets. They're the backbone of kind of food and income security for 180 million people, and particularly the poorest of the poor and women. And in the case of cassava, which is where my research focuses, cassava is also a drought-resistant crop, which will become more important with global climate change. So now moving into our mandate to mainstream gender. The CGIAR does a great deal of biological research, agricultural research of various sorts. We also need to keep in mind that this is all done in a social context. Gender has become a very strong focus within the CGIAR, and we have a mandate to mainstream gender, integrate gender into the agricultural research. So there's a commitment there that's CG-wide and certainly has been adopted in RTB. In 2012, we started developing a gender strategy, which was finished in 2013. So if you go to the RTB website online, there'll be a gender page, and you can find our gender strategy there, which outlines our various themes, which I'll briefly talk about here, but you can see them all in more detail, and you can see, what are our plans as far as how are we approaching integrating gender into those various substantive themes within RTB. Now, I want to let you know that there are real people out there in RTB that if you were to work with us, these are some of the people you would be working with. We have, in each center, we have a gender focal point. So I'm the gender focal point at CGIAR for RTB, roots, tubers, and bananas. Each center has someone like myself that's there working on gender. And some of the centers have more than one person. So there's a group of people out there that if you were to do work with RTB on social science and gender work, you'd be working with some of these folks. So how are we approaching gender work in RTB? We have two different types of research. We have what we call integration research, and we have strategic research. So our integration research is where it's an agricultural project, and we are looking for ways to ensure that we are taking gender into account in that agricultural context, so that both men and women are benefiting, their needs are taken into account, the social relations and power relations between men and women are considered, as far as ways in which we go about reaching project success. Our strategic gender research is where we're focusing on a gender question. And our mandate is really to integrate gender, but to do that, we feel strongly that we also need to do some strategic gender research to help inform our integration research. So what do I mean by gender integration research? To me, it's really these two related questions of how does innovation, agricultural and technological innovation, affect different groups of people? So men and women. We also take into account other axes of difference, whether it be race, ethnicity, age, class, etc. But also, how do gender relations affect the success of the project? We're interested in both of those questions. Okay, now this slide here is very dense in text, and you can find it in our gender strategy. What we've got over here on the left side here are the RTB themes, the substantive themes, and there are 7 of them in total. I only have 6 up here because the 7th one is the cross-cutting, which includes gender and partnership building and knowledge management. But these are our 6 substantive themes that really will give you a sense for what is the work that RTB does. So we work on conserving and accessing genetic resources, accelerating the development and selection of varieties with key traits that people want. We work on managing pests. We also are focusing on making available low-cost, high-quality planting material, seeds, developing tools for cropping systems, and promoting post-harvest technologies and value chains. So that's kind of the work that RTB is focused on from an agricultural perspective. And then within each one of these themes, we've got objectives for our gender work. And that's what's kind of written over here, and you can read more about in our gender strategy. So I won't go through all of them, but just to give you an example, for the first one, where we're looking at conserving and accessing genetic resources, our gender objective is to develop a gendered understanding of indigenous knowledge and practice in conservation and use of varieties. So we want to understand how men and women's indigenous knowledge varies in the conservation of genetic resources. Okay, so now I'd like to just give you a very, very brief few slides that will just give you an idea of some of the different integration projects that we have in our portfolio. And I'm not going to go into much detail about them, but just what I want to do is give you a sense for what type of work are we doing. So we're partnering, RTB's partnering with the Next Gen Cassava project, and the objective here is to understand farmers' preferences for different varieties and how that differs for men and women. What are the key traits that men and women are interested in? And my understanding of this project is that the goal is to identify and understand how men and women talk about different characteristics within cassava. So what are the names that they use for different qualities, and create essentially a dictionary of those traits and compare that. So that could be compared to the names and the language that breeders use, so that breeders and farmers can talk to each other, and farmers can be able to explain, these are the traits that we care about, this is what we want, and breeders could then understand what that means. Another project is in Malawi, and this is a case study on improving access for men and women to quality seed potato. And in this project, a framework for seed systems was tested to see how well gender has been integrated into it. So this was a pilot study in Malawi. There's also a project on nutrition in the Andes in Ecuador, Bolivia, and Peru. And here the objective is to understand how the relationship between gender and nutritional practices and how that affects the nutritional status of young children. And this is a pest management project for a disease called banana bunchy top disease. And the objective here is to really learn about the types of support that men and women need in order to be able to put in practice a management practice that has been developed for banana bunchy top disease. And this, I think, was in Uganda. There we go. So I'm going to move on to strategic gender research. So we also do strategic gender research in a number of different locations. And these are only a few, and these are kind of where we're focused currently. In Bangladesh and the Northeast Hills in India, East and Central Africa, Northern Colombia, and Haiti. We have identified a number of themes for our strategic research. And these actually apply to our integration research as well, these themes. These are really the top ones that we focus on. Nutrition, and an example of a question in nutrition that interests us is what are the main social factors in RTB projects that affect the nutritional health of children and mothers. We also are very interested in the development of varieties, improving varieties of cassava and other roots and tubers. So one of the important questions is, to what extent does gender affect the successful adoption of new varieties? And value chains is a strong part of our work. So we're interested in how gender shapes the development of value chains, how to improve livelihoods of both men and women in equitable ways. Okay, and we also are involved in a global study which has just been branded Genovate. So if you see the term Genovate out there, that's what it refers to, this study on gender norms, agency, and agricultural innovation. And this is a comparative study that involves, I believe there's 21 PIs that are doing studies around the world in Asia, Latin America, and Africa. It involves 12 CGIAR research programs. So like RTB is one of those. There are 11 other programs involved in this study. What is it about? Well, the idea is to look at how gender norms and agency influence the ability of men and women and youth to try out and adopt new technologies, and also to reach the agricultural researchers and give them information about their target audience, and to let them know about their beneficiaries. The main research questions are: how do gender norms and agency advance or impede agricultural or natural resource management innovation? How do agricultural innovations and natural resource management innovations affect gender norms and agency? Under what conditions might women or men be harmed by the introduction of an innovation? And how are gender norms and men's and women's agency changing? Those are some of the questions we're looking at in that study. Okay, so that's the overview of the research that we're doing in integrating gender into our agricultural research. And that brings me to this partnership that we've started. So last year, USAID has a linkage fund for linking universities to CGIAR projects, and we applied for it and won this small grant that kind of kicked things off. And we had a workshop in Cali, Colombia last October, and brought a number of university professors to Cali, to CIAT, the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. And we also brought representatives from the 4 CGIAR centers that belong to RTB, so that those biophysical researchers and faculty members could get to know each other, learn about each other's work. And the concept here of this partnership is that we have, in RTB, we have this mandate to integrate gender in theoretically all our projects. And that's a very tall order. And staffing is insufficient to do that. And yet there are folks in universities out there who are looking to do research, wanting to do research. There are students needing to do master's theses and PhD dissertations. So the idea is to collaborate in a mutually beneficial way, to bring, whether it be students or it could be faculty as well, to come and work in our research sites in an agricultural context, and do a social science project that would have a gender component to it. And the idea is that it will be helpful to the students and provide certain benefits to the students, and also be helpful to us, and that we would get kind of increase the amount of gender integration that we're able to do. So these are the 2 main objectives. Increasing gender research in RTB projects and providing opportunities to students. Here's a couple shots from one from the workshop in Cali last fall. This is a cassava peeling experiment, and you can see you probably don't know these people necessarily, but we've got professors from various universities, and we've got CG people here all getting to know one another and learning about cassava. And over here, we've got a shot from Djeinam's work, which you'll hear about a little bit more in a bit, from the northern part of Colombia, where she and this other student here, Philip Jacob from the University of San Francisco, who is involved in this partnership, working on developing a tool to assess intra-household income allocation. And they're also working in collaboration with this lady here, who is a professor at the University of Cordoba in Monteria, Colombia. So now I'm going back to objective 1, which is increasing the gender research in RTB project sites, and just some more details about that. So who are we talking about? Really, this is very open. We could be talking about master's students, PhD students. We could be talking about faculty that want to get involved in direct collaboration. Roughly speaking, if we're looking at a master's student, our expectation would be they might come for several months at a time. If it's a PhD student, we would be interested in someone coming for maybe 6 months to a year. And faculty, you know, the door is open. There's lots of researchers out there that are interested in working with particularly social scientists to do this gender integration work. How would the supervision work? If we've got a student doing a master's thesis or a PhD dissertation, they're going to have an advisor here at their home university. So that person, that advisor, would be a key person in this whole collaboration, in the design of the project and negotiating what the project is with the student. There'd also be also support and local supervision from the CGIAR side as well. And it's important that the candidates, the students that are would essentially be applying for these positions, have certain skills that would allow them to do the gender work, including the cultural skills to speak the language in the area where they'll be working, or if it's a quantitative project, they have the statistical skills, or a qualitative project, just that they have the skills to do the work. For objective 2, providing opportunities to the students, what can RTB offer to the students? So we can offer access to field sites in Africa, Asia, Latin America. We have a vast network of both professional scientists and local contacts, technical support, logistical support, people to work with in the field, access to field staff, transportation, a lot of in-kind support, office space, internet, etc. And also, because we have this mandate to integrate gender, there is the possibility that there are also operational funds available. There's no guarantee of that, but these projects are tasked with integrating gender. And so some amount of funding from the RTB side should be available to collect data. So that's a piece that needs to be negotiated in every case. As I mentioned, there would also be supervision and support from the RTB side in the local context within the home office of whatever center you're working with. There's a gender focal point in each center that would be helping to give input in designing the project and giving support along the way. Again, RTB researchers would negotiate the project with the students. So oftentimes students have certain ideas in mind of, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to study. We're not expecting that students come in and fill a narrow, pre-designed project. We would have an agricultural project that's going on, and the idea is the student would come and talk to the researcher that's leading that project and bring their interest to the table and say, this is what I'm interested in. I think this is relevant to your project context, and the two would, along with the supervisor, the academic advisor, and the gender focal point, all negotiate and design a project that's kind of fits everyone's needs. That's the idea. And and hopefully there's publications that come out of it for both students and RTB researchers. So the big question, funding, how does this happen? So this year it looks like we're going to have 7 students going to the field in RTB sites. So how did that happen? In each case it's been kind of a matching process where RTB projects, and I think all of them, are putting forth some amount of funding for those to host those students and for those students to gather the data. And then the students, in some cases, come with some funding from the university. Some have applied for travel grants or other, student research grants. We have a faculty member who applied for who applied for faculty grants. In one case, she gave the money to her student. The other case, she's going to the field to work with her student with that grant. So what we're envisioning is kind of a process of matching funds to make it work. RTB also has a separate fund for gender integration, and there's discussion about accessing some of that, some of those funds for kind of small student grants, and that's under discussion. So how would it be coordinated? This is all still in process, still getting developed, but the idea is that we've RTB researchers will develop these kind of concise descriptions of their projects, and there's some examples on the back table. There's one stack where I made more copies that has 2 projects, one on each side, that are still unfilled. So if anyone's interested in either of those projects, they're open opportunities. The other ones, and I marked them, are already filled. Those are the ones that the students are going to the field with this year. But I wanted to just have them out there for displaying to give you a sense for what types of projects are people working in. So the researchers start out and they will describe what their projects are from the agricultural context. Some researchers, these biophysical researchers, some have clear ideas of what are social issues and gender issues that relate to their projects. Others don't. So we're not requiring them to define what those gender questions would be. That's something that would be done along the way. These templates will be posted to a website we're developing. So in the future, we'll be sending out notices to these universities that are involved in the partnership, getting it out into those networks, and then direct people to our website where students and faculty can go to look and see what's available now. And then respond directly to the head PIs of those projects and essentially apply. And we're going to develop a template where the student would basically fill out kind of an application and send it to the PI. Then there would be, just like with a job, an interview process essentially to ensure that there's a good match. And that would involve our gender focal points as well as the biological researcher. This is a list of the universities that we are currently involved in the partnership. And these are the titles of the 2 opportunities. They're on the back table that are currently still available to people. So there's the Sweet Potato Action for Security and Health in Africa, and that's located in Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Uganda. And driving livelihood improvements through demand-oriented interventions for competitive production and processing of RTBs in Vietnam. Okay, so that's it. If you're interested, we'll have to talk more. There's the lunch, and you can always contact me via email. So I think now Djeinam is going to give us a little bit of insight about her experience. She's been one of these people who doesn't fit the mold that I was just describing of a master's or PhD student looking for a field site, because she's already got her field site. But we had, through this funding that we got through USAID, we had allotted some money for a research project. And so we had this research project on inter-household income allocation that we needed someone to work on. So she and Philip Jacob from the University of San Francisco have been working on that. They went to Colombia in January to pilot this tool, and Djeinam is going to be going to Nigeria in, looks like early June. So she'll tell you some more about that.
Thanks for that. So as Kate mentioned, I have been partnering with RTB over the last semester. For those of you who don't know me, I am a 4th-year PhD student in the Division of Nutritional Sciences. And my research interests broadly are at the nexus between agriculture, nutrition, and gender. And so this was essentially the topic of my dissertation research, which I did in sub-Saharan Africa, which is where I have most of my experience, working with another university linkage grant from the CG, but mostly with the FPRI. And it was really nice to have the institutional backing and support to do field work for my dissertation work. So I really jumped at the opportunity to be able to do some more gender-focused work with Kate and another one of the CG centers. So as Kate mentioned, the work that Philip and I, the student at the University of San Francisco, did is around income allocation. So in the interest of time, I'll tell you that measuring women's access to income is something that's kind of fraught with error. It's difficult to do. The main metric that people use is surveys, but for those of you who have done field work, you know that survey questions, it's questionable whether you're really getting at bargaining power, right? So the typical questions are, who makes decisions about X, Y, and Z in the household? And the answers that you get are invariably, we decide together. Yes, the next question, we decide together. The next question, we decide together. And if you have some knowledge or understanding of the context, you know that it's a bit more nuanced than that oftentimes, and that is lost oftentimes in survey questions. So Kate's idea was to develop innovative and more insightful measures of intra-household income allocation. And so she reached out to Philip and myself through this university linkage to do some work around it. So Philip Jacob is an econ student at the University of San Francisco, and he scoured the literature and came across experimental games as a potential way to more insightfully look at income allocation. So I'll walk you through that very briefly, but essentially it's a game that's played with both members of the couple, so husband and a wife, and they perform a small task for which they receive a small amount of income, and then they're asked to make choices. So the income is real income. It's not a hypothetical situation that they are allowed to keep. So if these two people are a couple, each member of the couple is taken in isolation, and with an enumerator. Sorry, the picture's kind of hard to see, but they're asked to perform a task. So in this case, it's just sorting of lentils, for which they receive a small amount of money. And each participant is then asked to allocate that money, either to a household pot or just to themselves. They can take it totally secretly and run with the money. No one would know. And so the caveat is that money that's allocated to the household pot is increased by 50%. So the lucrative and efficient thing to do is to allocate 100% of your income to the household pot. But that's also knowing that the money from the household pot is then given to the husband for him to decide how it's divided between the household. So if you have a greedy husband, there's a good chance that you're just gonna run with the money, right? So the idea is to observe how people make decisions, to see whether women really have control over income in the household. So I hope that was clear, but you can ask questions in just a minute. And the idea is to do 3 rounds of that, with the information about the endowment and decision being totally private, so totally secret, and then doing the same exercise, letting the spouse know that their decision and their income endowment is public, so that their spouse would know how much they were keeping for themselves and how much they were allocating to the pot. And the third scenario is for the couple to just do the activity together. So the idea really, as I said, is to observe these decisions in real time when the stakes are higher. And so Philip's piece was to refine that protocol and pilot it in Colombia. And my piece in this is to adapt that and kind of refine it based on the lessons that we learned from the piloting and adapt it for the Nigerian context. So Philip did this work with myself in Colombia. As Kate mentioned, with the University of Cordoba, their students and their faculty, and 2 you-could-produce regions that had previously been surveyed by CGIAR. So that was a nice institutional link for him to be able to implement his research, which might have been very difficult otherwise. So it was nice that CGIAR had kind of some roots there and had done some work there before. And the photos are just to give you a sense of what the context looked like, subsistence farming communities. This is the team in the area. And we did this exercise with 40 couples. And Philip probably has a better sense of the data, but some of the takeaways that I will work on in the next iteration in Nigeria is that there's some confusion around the communal pot, kind of whether people are actually pooling income and if that's a salient concept for us to be using. The game comprehension can sometimes be challenging, so that's something that we're working on for the next iteration in Nigeria. And what we found is that women were more likely to hide income in one of the contexts than in the other. And interestingly, there was no real link between a woman's income hiding, which is, I guess, indicative of less bargaining power in a household, and survey questions that are asking whether or not they have control over income. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there, which is interesting. So moving forward with that, I'll be refining the tool and repiloting it in southern Nigeria in conjunction with NextGen, the cassava breeding project that Kate mentioned just a second ago, and the IITA, and layering on a question of whether market orientation for cassava has an impact on income allocation in the household. So that's just an example of, I guess, one of the partnerships.